What's up, Big Ten fans? Michael Dugan here from internsbig10.com. No podcast this week, in case you guys missed our tweet. No podcast this week. Instead, you get this, an extended brief video reaction, if you will, where I'll go a little more in depth than we do in our usual weekly prediction videos. This is going to be a recap video. We had some things come up where we're pushing the podcast to later in the week. There will still be a podcast this week, but there will not be a recap podcast. Instead, it will be a preview podcast Thursday or Friday. So keep an eye out for that, and keep an eye on our Twitter page, and we will stay tuned with you for that. So, Game 1, the first one, I'll come out and say it, I was dead wrong. Duke went into Evanston and absolutely put a bludgeoning on Northwestern. The Wildcats scored on their first drive and then went over 55 minutes without putting up a single point on Duke. And it's the second year in a row they've completely fallen flat on their face against the Blue Devils. I don't know what it is. I have my opinion, and from what I saw, and the offensive play calling was way too conservative. They came out with no drive, really, to win that game. I know, like I said, they scored on their first drive, but after that, there was no will to be there. I don't know if it's because it was 11 in the morning or what it was. It wasn't the debut. They weren't under the lights in a great environment. I don't know what it was. The weather wasn't terrible, but they just did not look like they wanted to be there at all. I don't know what got into them, but that was completely uninspired football, uninspiring football. It was bad in most phases, and outside the second quarter, that defense was okay, but I mean, Clayton Thorson was given nothing to succeed there. That offensive line got no push on the Duke front, and the offensive play calling was just conservative and average at very, very best. So that was a week to forget for Northwestern. I really thought this would be a season that would change things and be different than what we've seen from these teams in the past, but right now, everything could change. Fitz usually gets his teams going late September, early October, but at least in recent history. But right now, this looks like it's just more of the same Northwestern with just a complete roller coaster season. Maybe they fix it. They've got the talent to do it, but I saw nothing on Saturday to tell me that that's going to be the case. Let's breeze through Wisconsin, New Mexico. Jonathan Taylor was tremendous. We know he's legit. That offensive line is one of the scariest units in all of college football. If they go undefeated and end up playing Clemson in the playoff, and that's looking way ahead, that's going to be one of the better unit-to-unit matchups that we've ever seen in the playoff, in the history of the playoff. Granted, it's a very, very young history, but that's going to be one of the better matchups, if it happens. That's a dream scenario right now. I'm crossing my fingers for that one. Obviously, I know that's looking way into the future, but that's something that if I could pick a situation or a matchup right now for the first round of the playoff, I'm picking that, so I can see that Clemson front seven, that defensive line could have gotten drafted, every single one of them, into the first or second round of the NFL last year in April, and that Wisconsin offensive line is just a force, especially when you got Jonathan Taylor back there. So that one, that's all I got from that, was that Jonathan Taylor was just amazing. Rutgers, Ohio State. Rutgers put some points up on the board in Columbus, but that's about all they did. Dwayne Haskins was tremendous. He was 20 of 23 for 233 and 4 touchdowns. Not really sure what else to say there. I mean, Ohio State's dominant, and we're going to learn more about them in the first half of this game against TCU than we did in the first 2 games of their entire season against, no offense to Rutgers and Oregon State, not great opponents. Next one up, Penn State-Pittsburgh. That was another snoozer. Like I said, I thought Penn State was too talented for what happened against Appalachian State, and I know James Franklin absolutely despises Pittsburgh, so I'm not too surprised that he just absolutely put a beating on them. Trace McSorley's numbers weren't gorgeous, but he got the job done, and they won 51-6, so it doesn't really matter what his numbers looked like. I don't know that Penn State's as good as that score indicates. We also don't know how good Pittsburgh is, but I'm telling you right now, Penn State's not going to be as good as they were last year. There are too many holes they have to fix defensively. I know they only allowed 6 points, but without Kabinda and Allen and those guys, and I think even without the safety net of Mike Gesicki, that's going to come down to haunt them down the stretch, especially in the Big Ten East. I'm going to save Michigan State, Arizona State for last and go to Michigan, Western Michigan. Yes, that offense finally woke up. Round of applause for Shea Patterson and Jim Harbaugh. Shea Patterson, 12 of 17 with 3 touchdowns. But more importantly, Karan Higdon ran the ball extremely well. He had 13 carries for 156 yards, and he found the end zone once. And that's really where Jim Harbaugh's teams and offenses are going to find a living. That's where they're going to open up the playbook, is if they can get that run game going. And they did just that against the Broncos. Granted, this is a Western Michigan team that is not good in any way, shape, or form. Syracuse almost hung 60 on them in week 1. So don't lose your minds over this 49-3 final. I don't want to say we should be seeing that, because that's a brutal score for almost anyone against almost anyone within the FBS. but that was pretty impressive by Michigan, and I think that that's something that we absolutely needed to see, and I wasn't quite sure we would see that. So I'm very, very intrigued by Michigan going forward. Eastern Michigan and Purdue. What a busy day for the state of Michigan. I mean, my goodness. I mean, I don't know what's going on with Purdue. I thought Rondale Moore was a playmaker and a half, and it turns out he didn't break this game open in any way, and that Purdue defense was completely, it fell apart. That Purdue defense, fell apart in the fourth quarter, and the field goal to win it, that touchdown, and most importantly, that unnecessary roughness call again. They lost them a game again. They could arguably, you could make the case they'd be 2-0 right now if they didn't have these two boneheaded plays on the quarterback late in the fourth quarter. Instead, they're 0-2 with losses at home to Northwestern, who just got bludgeoned by Duke at home, and Eastern Michigan, who beat Rutgers in Piscataway last year. So I don't know what's going on with Jeff Brom's squad, but they're 0-2 in 2 home games to start the year. In 2 games, honestly, they probably should have won. Colorado, Nebraska, this one was a little disappointing for me. I think I picked Nebraska in my video last week. They laid a goose egg in the fourth quarter, and I understand that they got some QB instability there, and Martinez, the true freshman, and everything that happened there. But look, at the end of the day, this is a project for Scott Frost. He wasn't brought in here to turn them from 4-8 to 8-4 immediately. He's a young guy who did great things with UCF last season, and obviously you know the story with him, and he's starting a true freshman at quarterback. And this Colorado team is no slouch. This is a pretty good Colorado team with high offensive capability, so I'm not too down on Nebraska right now. To me, you could easily make the case that a close loss in a coach's debut, especially with a true freshman at quarterback, is almost as beneficial, if not more beneficial, than running an FCS team out of the stadium. I personally would take a close loss at home. Granted, they want to play for bowl eligibility, but it's not looking too great depending on what happens with that rescheduling of the Week 1 lightning delay out, if you will. But so I don't know that they'll make a bowl game this year, but if I want to look at my how I want my coach to grow with this program, and he wants to make it his program, and I'm giving him the keys to the city, I'll take a Power 5 loss at home. That was a very, very, very close loss late in the game over just a blowout of Northwestern State at home. I'll take that any day. There's a lot to learn from, especially with a true freshman quarterback and a new coach and a new system. So I wouldn't be down if I'm Nebraska right now. Iowa State and Iowa, that was a snoozer. The Cy-Hawk Trophy within that state obviously means a lot. That's a very fierce rivalry. But this game was, quite honestly, this game was boring. Nate Stanley was okay. I mean, he 16-28 with 166 yards, didn't find the end zone. I mean, they scored on a 2-yard touchdown run in the fourth quarter. That was the only touchdown of the game. Before that, we only had 3 field goals. I don't know how much we learned from that game, just because I don't know that Iowa knows exactly who they are yet, which is pretty unique. We don't say that too often with the Kirk Ferentz coach team, but we said it this week, and I don't know that they have a great idea of what their identity is right now. So we'll see how they grow from this. But I have a lot of question marks about Iowa right now. Let's see. Maryland, Bowling Green. Let's go to that one. Maryland's rolling right now. They're 2-0 with they stole a win in Landover at FedEx Field against Texas. And, I mean, you look at Ty Johnson, that dude can scoot. I'll tell you what. He could be the fastest guy, offensively speaking, in the Big Ten. I'd put him right up there with Paris Campbell. Watch those guys go 40 side by side. Would be an absolute joy to watch. They're playing pretty well right now. 28 points in the fourth quarter, put the game to bed. They were up 17-14 going in, and they just put the game to bed. They won by 31 points. So Maryland's rolling right now. Western Illinois and Illinois. Okay, Illinois got a double-digit win. That's progress. That's something to look forward to. But one of those touchdowns was a block punt. I tend to write those off when I want to look at the overall growth of a team, and obviously special teams is not something to write off completely. But you want to take that away. If you take that point away, that something doesn't happen. Maybe it's a good snap. Maybe Illinois doesn't get the jump that they do against a Big Ten team like they did here. And we're looking at 27-14 against an 0-2 now Western Illinois team. It's nothing to write home about, but I'm being very nitpicky here. At this point for Illinois, they're 2-0. A win is a win. I still think they're the worst team in the Big Ten. But we'll see. Maybe this is a turning point for them. Minnesota, this is a good Fresno State team. Do not write off the Bulldogs for this one. This is a good win for Minnesota. Quarterback play, still a question mark there. It has been for the last season and I guess a sixth under PJ Fleck. But hey, they're 2-0. They're in the West. They could go bowling this year. So I think any win right now for Minnesota and Illinois is something that they can be proud of. They'll fix things, but like I said, they're in two very different positions as programs. But for this season specifically, a win is a win for both of those programs. All right, let's go up to Indiana and Virginia. I was at this game. This was a lot of fun. It was about 55, 60 degrees, and the rain was coming in like this. It was an absolute monsoon. Technically speaking, it actually was. That was a rain system that came over southern Indiana from Hurricane Gordon that hit Mississippi earlier in the week. So that was crazy. My walk from my car up to the press box, my jeans got so soaked they didn't even dry. They were still sticking to my leg wet in the fourth quarter. That's how wet it was. But Stevie Scott for Indiana, 31 carries, 204 yards. He only had one touchdown. It was a quick 40-yard scamper. This dude's built like a linebacker, and he runs like a running back, and he's a freshman. That should instill fear in Big Ten opponents. And Indiana has produced Tevin Coleman, Jordan Howard, Devine Redding's been in and out of practice squads and training camps with the NFL. He was a 1,000-yard rusher. Don't forget about him. Indiana's putting together a pretty good set of running backs in the last half decade. That's a name you should remember. Now, they squeaked out a win in this one, and Ball State is coming to Bloomington next week. And Ball State hung with Notre Dame. Riley Neal is a great quarterback, 3-year starter for the Cardinals up in Muncie, but that's not going to be an easy game for Indiana. I don't know what the line is right now. I bet you it's going to change between now and kickoff, but that is not something that Indiana should ever hit the snooze button for. They could very easily lose this game. I think that Ball State team is every bit as good as Virginia. Now the conditions will be a little more favorable for both teams on the playing surface, but that's going to be a good game, and we're going to learn a lot about Indiana in that one and see what they're made of. Okay, now for the one that most of you probably didn't watch because it ended at about 2 in the morning, but Michigan State and Arizona State. I've been a little hard on Mark D'Antonio, not quite as hard as I have been on his other Michigan counterpart in Jim Harbaugh. I really thought this team was going to be different this year. I really did. I thought they had the returning guys on offense, the returning pieces, to put something together that would be better than what Michigan State teams in the past have seen, because the Michigan State teams that have been great under Mark D'Antonio have been elite defensively, but they haven't been overly spectacular offensively. They've just been good with Jeremy Langford, Le'Veon Bell, Connor Cook, all those guys, that team that won the Big Ten with Connor Cook. I don't know what's going on with them. First of all, I was also wrong about Herm Edwards. I thought he'd flop completely in Tempe, but he hasn't, and he's got them 2-0, and I think that's still a pretty good Michigan State team. I don't think this is a Michigan State team that's going to go 3-9 like they did 2 seasons ago. We thought they'd be great. Turns out they weren't. They went 3-9, but I think I don't know what to think of this Michigan State team. I really don't. It's perplexing to me because, like I said, I really thought this team offensively would improve on what they were last year. And last year they were a pretty good team. Defensively, they always seemed to figure it out. But, they have a lot of question marks right now. So that's probably the team I have the most questions about and I'm most concerned about. I have a lot of questions about Iowa, but I think in the grand scheme of things, that game against Wisconsin is going to decide who wins that division. Northwestern ain't doing it. I don't think Nebraska's doing it. It's going to come down between Iowa and Wisconsin. Whoever wins that game when those two play pretty soon, mark your calendars, whoever wins that game is going to have a leg up in the race, but I think it'd take heaven and earth to get Wisconsin to not win that division, quite honestly. All right, I think I hit everything. Thank you all for staying with me for the full almost 14 minutes now. Again, no podcast this week. This was your filler. If you have any questions, if I missed something, please let me know. I only have 2 eyes. I'm only one person. I could only watch so much football this weekend. But I think I did a pretty good job of keeping in tune with what's going on around the Big Ten. But conference play is revving up really, really, really soon. So that's when we're going to have a lot of these questions answered. Again, hit me on Twitter if you have any questions. Charlie and I will be back on Friday, I believe, is when our podcast is going to come out. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll talk to you then.